if you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time.
All right. Good morning and welcome to another Counter Racist Code Show, also called the CRCS, with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. To get in contact with the show, just dial 516-453-9921. Let me repeat that very slowly. 516-453-9921. And when you do that, be sure to press the number 1 button, and that will that will put you at the top of the line. And Mr. Fuller will answer the call and help us to problem solve. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, Bobby, and I will at times read your Gmails. This program is also a work in progress. We are still learning how to do it better. So when we come across an idea that we think might work, we will. I know last week I said that we would do 15 minutes of the Gmails at the beginning of the program, but after a short meeting, we decided that sometime in the program, maybe around the 15-minute mark or whatever, before we take the first break, 10 to 15 minutes, we are going to put in a couple of Gmails and have Mr. Fuller address that, because we do not want to neglect our Gmail community. So that's what we will do, which means that you might be on hold for a little while, but if you are on hold, trust me, Mr. Fuller will answer your question as soon as we get to that. Okay, let's see here. Let's do this, start off. Okay, in the number 1 position, we have Richard. Oh, by the way, when you call in, please give our call screener your name. That helps me. Thank you, Mark from Canada. We got Richard. Okay, thank you. Let's do this. Let's go from Richard. Let me see, get you in here, Richard. Wow, I tried to get you in here. Okay, there we go. Richard, good morning and welcome. What's your question for Mr. Fuller?
Yeah, hello?
Yes, you're on.
Yes, my question is, can Mr. Fuller explain in detail how the white supremacists teach other white people to go dominate and mistreat non-white people?
Explain how white people teach other white people to do what?
To go dominate and mistreat other non-white people.
Oh, just by teaching anybody anything. You teach people how to drive a car. You teach people how to fish. You teach people how to raise chickens. It's just a matter of teaching people their alphabet, their language, or whatever. So if you're going to start a project, and there was a project started called the System of White Supremacy, somebody thought it up somewhere along the line, let's do all the world's business on the basis of what color somebody is. And we're going to have a hierarchy of colors. And that hierarchy will be that if you are fortunate enough to be born white, you will be royal. In other words, kings and queens. That will be your basic label, even though people may not use it on a daily basis that way. But that's your label.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a female and you're a white person, classified as white, officially looked upon as white, treated as white by the people that you know and everybody that you encounter, they recognize you as being a quote, unquote, white person, then you are a member of the royal family. And we're going to make that whiteness, it's going to be, well, a gangster operation, like the Corleones or whatever, like the Capones. And everybody who is in the family is going to be looked out for. Lots of benefits are going to go with this enterprise. Now, everybody else is going to be classified as black, brown, red, yellow, etc., and under the umbrella of non-white, white, non-white. That's going to be it. That's going to be the categories. However, in order to fool the people, we're going to give them all kinds of categories. We're going to call them Pacific Islanders. We're going to call them this, and we're going to call them that. And we're going to let them even call themselves by whatever they want to be. But the classifications are going to be white, non-white, and white supremacists. And if you are white, you are eligible to become a white supremacist. You have to be white. You have to be fortunate enough, quote unquote, to be born white. Now, you might ask, logically speaking, what school do they teach that in? Well, the teaching is going to come through just demonstration. If you are born white, at some point you begin to notice that people are classified by color. And if you look it up in the different censuses, like the recent census that was given, everything is about color for the most part. Just about, I don't know what percentages you would say, but just look at the forms that have been given in the Northwestern Hemisphere. Race is the dominant thing. Something called race or racism or racism. I think it may have had its roots somewhere in, something called Ra, and I understand that's associated with the sun. I don't know how that all works out. Somebody can look that up. I never have. But I understand that two-letter word, Ra, it might be R-A-H, maybe, 3 letters. And it has to do with the sun. Because many white people say that in ancient times that people who have color in their skin are people who have been burnt by the sun over a long period of time. Now, people argue that back and forth. But anyhow, we're going to have a hierarchy. And everybody who's classified as white will be royal. Now, what does royal mean? It means kings and queens. And kings and queens in the ancient sense, people who can do no wrong. You're white, so you're always right. Always right when it comes to people of color, people who are non-white. And you will do what I say, and I will dominate you, and you will learn from birth that that's your place, to always be dominated, and for fun, glory, and my convenience, material convenience, mistreated. But we won't look at it as mistreatment. We'll look at it as the natural order of things. And we'll spread that idea all over the world. And I guess the first people that thought it up said, do you think that'll really work? Do everything on the basis of color? No, I don't know. Let's try it. And apparently it turned out to be the most powerful political and religious idea in recorded history. And it took off like the brush fire in Australia recently, here in this year, 2020. It took off like that. It just went, it moved faster than anything ever did move in political and religious senses. Became the most powerful political and religious juggernaut among people in the world.
Okay.
I hope that
All
that
right.
explains it, because I
All
like
right.
for everybody to get that explanation.
Explanation, yes, sir.
And it's
Richard,
been going ever since.
Okay, Richard, thank you for your call. And as I usually say, do not be a stranger. Okay, let's go to Mark from Canada. Mark, you are live with Mr. Fuller. Douglas, we will get to you a little bit later. Go ahead, Mark from Canada.
Thank you very much. I'm so saddened as to what happened to George Floyd down there at the States. But my question is to Mr. Fuller, has black people made some sort of maybe a non-communicated agreement with the white supremacists, I should say, that if they were to guarantee our physical safety, they could somehow have our mind? It just seems like we're afraid. Thank you.
All righty. Mr. Fuller?
Well, I understand the question. Everybody who is classified as non-white was born in prison. So if you're born in prison, you don't know anything except prison life. That's all you know. You know what the prison masters tell you. We are their illegitimate children, captured our foreparents, and taught them to raise us as prisoners of war. So we've never been outside of the prisoner system, white supremacy. It's not like we had an option. It's not like they sat down and negotiated this thing. No, we were born already captured. We have already been in captivity. We don't know anything else other than captivity. That's why we are so absolutely out of our minds crazy and very dysfunctional. The non-white people of this planet don't know anything except for what the white supremacists say. Even though we brag about our ancient civilizations and all like that. Well, whatever so-called civilizations we had, if there ever were any, and I have my own doubts about that, but that's another story. Because I don't think people have ever been really civilized. I don't think we have ever been the very best that creatures called people can be. I don't think we have ever been that. I think that we have always had potential for being what I call universal man and universal woman. But I don't think anyone has ever qualified for that. Why? Based on what? I don't think there has ever been justice on this planet. Because in order to be universal man and universal woman, you have to have a universal world dominated by justice, which means what? Guaranteeing that no person, not for 2 seconds, is mistreated. And the other part, guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help in all areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And actually the war thing just means war against any kind of mistreatment. That's what it really should be. But war now means the system of white supremacy. And even before there ever was a system of white supremacy, which a lot of people say that there was a time when this was not the case, people were being mistreated. And not everyone was getting the help that they needed, the most constructive help. Now, people will say, that sounds utopian. Well, regardless of what you call it, that should be the aim. And I put the label of just justice, a simple term, guaranteeing that no one is mistreated, guaranteed, underline that, and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. Now, we understand that. A person might say, well, forget that. That ain't going to happen, whatnot. We already have we do in what we call civilized activity every day that indicates this is the way to go. We already do that, but just a little bit of it, just a smidgen of it. It doesn't even touch, it doesn't even go beyond just a little surface scratch. But I'll give an illustration. Cars lined up on the highway, bumper to bumper, what you call rush hour in the morning. But what do? They pull over when they hear what? The ambulance. You got a person with the virus in there. They're trying to get that person to a place called a hospital or some facility by that name, by a similar name. Everybody pulls over. It's a big inconvenience for everybody. Oh, here we go. Here I am, bumper to bumper, and red light fever early in the morning, and here comes another ambulance. Now I got to pull over again. So you pull over, maybe twice. You might be a little late where you're going, or a whole lot late. But everybody pulls over because there's a contract here. The person that needs help the most is that person in that ambulance, because they have figured out there, but for the grace of God, to use an old cliche, goes I. I might be the next person in that ambulance even before this ride to work is over. I might get broadsided by a semi-trailer truck in my little midget automobile. And I'm crushed inside, and somebody pulls me out and says, call an ambulance. I want people to pull over. So we learn that from experience. But we don't learn that on a world scale on a day-to-day basis. That's where we got to go. Nobody is mistreated. You don't deliberately mistreat anybody. If you find out you did, you correct that immediately. Okay? You got to guarantee it. And the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. Now, I try to give these little simple illustrations so that people can wrap their minds around it.
Yes.
But I probably have to move on now.
But
I
did
hope
good.
that answers the question.
Okay, you did good. Mark, thank you for calling. Do not be a stranger. This is what I'm going to do. Janine, you're going to be up next, and then Douglas, we are going to get you. But this is what we have to do now. It's 18 minutes past the hour, so let's do this. This is a Gmail. We have to get those in here, so let's do this. This comes from Raj. She says this, Mr. Fuller. Said Mr. Fuller is rioting and fighting with race soldiers and burning down business that black people do not own a strategist way of dismantling white supremacy and replacing it with justice? And what do you expect the consequences will be for these actions?
The consequences, that's what this whole program is about. What's going to be the consequences of me if I went out here right now and burned down the drugstore where I get my medicine? I want everybody to hear this. I said it during that so-called whatever happened over in Baltimore not too long ago in this area of the world.
You mean with Freddie Gray?
Yes.
Okay.
And I immediately, in the next program, if I recall correctly, it wasn't here on ProduceJustice.com. It was on TalkTainmentRadio.com at that time. I think that's when that happened.
Okay.
And several other programs. But when people asked me that same type question, I came right out of the textbook for victims of white supremacy. Riots, for the most part, where people just randomly do anything. Just do anything. Just running up and down the street, throwing bricks and whatnot, and throwing what they call Molotov cocktails or firebomb, like someone did, I understand, back in the 1960s. A young fellow, and I'm answering the question, he thought it was an excellent idea to burn down the liquor store down on the other end of the corner of the house where he resided, okay, where he and his grandmother had a house. So he went down and threw a firebomb into the liquor store and stood across the street and enjoyed the sight. But he was thinking that the fire engines would show up. The fire engines were already busy, the firefighters all over the place, trying to put out fires, and people throwing rocks at them while they did it. Now, just follow this sequence now, and maybe you might get my point, because I'm just talking about actions and reactions, actions and results. What is the result of these actions? Because everything in the universe is about what is the result of your actions. Where's the payoff? So the firebomb went into the liquor store, burned down the liquor store. He's got his fist all in the air saying black power, lots of theatrics and drama. Like black people, we are very dramatic. Okay, we like drama. No fire engines. So then the house next door to the liquor store went up. And then the one next to that went up. Billowing flames, people running out screaming. And then the next one, and the next one. And then the final house, the house where his poor grandmother was, where she had saved her little pennies, wrapping them up in a handkerchief. And finally, through scrubbing floors and ironing and taking care of white babies, her house went up in flames, and she almost got caught in it. He was barely able to get back down there and get her out of it. Now, this is a story that I heard. I hope I made the point. You don't burn the bridge that you're standing on. Stop that rioting. The record shows you don't get a lot out of it. You can demonstrate, you can make your point, you can figure out some type of strategy, mainly the strategy of how you're going to negotiate after everything quiets down. Here in 1968, I saw black people lined up trying to get some bread and asking the worn-out two people behind the counter, do you have any of this? Do you have any of that? My grandmother needs some milk. See, black people don't produce anything. Think about that. We're in position to have these prison riots, but you're not in charge of the entire prison and everything outside the gates of the prison. All right? So everything that you get, if you tear up the kitchen in the prison, destroy the recreation room, after it's all over, that basketball court that you begged to get in the prison, it's gone. And you say, well, I made my point. Okay, you made your point. But the way that you made it, did it inconvenience you more than it inconvenienced anybody else? You got to ask that question. I asked it in 1968. The firemen had dropped the hose because they said they were tired to the apartment building where I was here in Washington. I went out and picked up that hose myself. Now, a lot of people would say, Fuller, you helping the enemy. What do you think we're riding for? But I was using that hose to wet the roof on the apartment building where I had an offspring. Okay? I just want you to understand that. The place next door was burning. And the next place that was going to burn, if I hadn't had that hose, was going to be the place that I lay my head in every night. Now you might say, well, everybody's got to make sacrifices in a war. But maybe you should do a little bit of thinking. And this is just a compensatory suggestion. Because, see, I didn't go out and light no match and throw nothing in nothing. I think about what it's going to look like when we get ready to negotiate. You always negotiate from a point of strength, not from a point of weakness. And I tend to believe that when black people burn down the bridge that they are standing on, that makes them weaker, not stronger.
Okay. Let me get this in, Mr. Fuller, because we have 3 minutes toward break. This is from Mr. Black. He says this. He said, in the past week I've seen riots, protests throughout America, and this forces the government to ultimately reconsider their white-biased policies and how they exercise authority. Should all people use violence and destruction of white supremacist racist foundations such as businesses and law enforcement to continue the pursuit of justice? The racist whites in power deny the humanity of non-whites, but they, their families, and businesses can be eliminated very easily, and this is counter-violence/counter-force. We do not have to accept infertilization. We can kill, destroy, and elimination right now as well. When we will, non-white people, know when to destroy the unjust system of racism and white supremacy. I think every second of the day is the time to destroy this system, and that is unjust. Total war. People are moving now to confront these evils, demonic parasites, and they will have no answer. The price of freedom is death. Mr. Fuller, you have a minute to make comment on that. That came from Nathan.
Well, it seems like that just comes under VGQ, the person who's telling them. And just like everything that I said prior to that, people can make their own decisions. I mean, people who want to say that the best approach is just to destroy everything and start from scratch. That's the best approach. Just make just destroy everything, and everybody stand there and look at each other, and there's nothing to eat. There's no food that's coming. Nobody's growing anything and whatnot. And then say, okay, now, let's all start from scratch because we are now all equal now because nobody has nothing. Okay? Now, we can take that position. Or maybe we can preserve things, and if you got a beef, because I think even gangsters understand this. Remember what the Corleone said, talking to Tom Hagen in the back of the car. He said, hey, we're talking about going after these gunslingers, all of these people out here doing the cowboy thing, all of these hitmen. So, hitmen are made all the time. I mean, all you got to do is just pay them some money and they'll make a hit on people. He said, but I never knew until today it was Barzini all along. In other words, get to the head of the dragon.
Okay.
All right?
Let's do this,
that
Mr.
might be several people or several thousand people, but that's who you get to talk to. Gandhi understood that. He said, I didn't come here to talk about General Dyer and another incident of black people being killed here in India. I didn't come here to talk about that. I came here to talk about it's time you changed everything from the top.
I am so sorry to interrupt you, but I have to. Everybody, This is a required break, so I'm not trying to cut Mr. Fuller off. This is the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. Now, to get in contact with the show, you need to call 516-453-9921. Let me repeat that slowly. 516-453-9921. Be sure to press the number 1 button as Janine with an N and Douglas have, so that you can go to the head of the line and Mr. Fuller will address your question there. Let's see. Anything else I have to do? Yeah, okay. That's it. Okay. Let's do this. Seems like I missed something here. But anyway, I'll go ahead on. Okay, Janine, thank you. You have been holding. And let me see here. Let me get the right buttons in here. Okay. You are on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question, please?
Yes, hi. I just have a comment.
Okay.
I think we must realize that these racist people evidently have a defective DNA or RNA or genes or something, because the way they act is not human. Now, I don't know whether they're humanoids or mutants, but I think a large population of members of the so-called white race, they clearly have made themselves not part of humanity, because they call themselves a race and not humans. But I really think there's something wrong with their DNA. I really believe that. Because they do not act humanly, and they just haven't since they crawled out of those caves from over there in Europe or wherever they came from, and I don't think that's their original come-from place, actually. Okay. That's just one little thought of mine. I have many thoughts.
Okay. It comes under, I believe Mr. Fuller says VGQ. Thank you, Janine with an N, and don't be a stranger, okay?
Okay.
All righty. Thank you. All righty. Let's do this here. Let me move up to Douglas. You've been holding for a while. Thank you, and good morning. And what is your question for Mr. Fuller?
Hey, good morning, Mr. Fuller. Good morning, Bobby. My question for Mr. Fuller is a lot of scholars and a lot of black people, it seems like they're blind and don't even see the system of white supremacy, whereas though they think it's just some, random police conditioning, or the police wasn't trained right, or we need to change the police. And I really think that it's a worldwide system. And like you said, Mr. Fuller, the lines is just for the people that's in the prison because they don't follow lines. Why can't we get this message from some of our, celebrities, some of our scholars, and even politicians?
Oh, if that's the question, you just do it. See, the way to, I think it's Confucius, if I recall correctly, who said, the way to learn to play the flute is to play the flute. We just do it. We just say it. But we haven't been using even the correct words, in my opinion. This is just my opinion, because this is what my textbook is all about. Everybody's opinion should be heard, because no one has solved the problem. No one has solved the problem, so everybody's opinion may work. I'm saying a lot of the glue that holds the system of white supremacy together, first of all, are the words. I think there's even, what some people say is an old Bible saying, in the beginning there was the Word. When you go to court, you see benches in there. You see chairs. And then you see, lastly, when they're occupied, it's occupied with people. Now, what do those people do in what you call a courtroom? They pass words around. And then as a result of those words being passed around, people either get in very, 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 very fortunate circumstances, or they walk out of that courtroom with their head down, knowing that their absolute future has been obliterated. You got no future. That's the way some people walk out of that courtroom. And as a result of what? Of people shooting in there or something like that, or the food that they ate? No, wasn't any food in there. There were a few people standing around with guns, but no shooting. What happened in there? Words. What happens in a university? Words. So you get the words straight. You use terms. I've spent years trying to get people to use the term supremacy. That's where the problem is. Call it that. Don't call it anything else. When you say racism, you're talking about white supremacy. There is no other form of racism, nowhere in the universe. Racism is white supremacy. White supremacy is racism. Tighten it up. That's why I put out a word guide. Police brutality. Stop saying that.
No such
It's
thing.
impossible for a police officer to be brutal. That's impossible. It can't be done. Okay, so you say, well, who are these people who are being brutal? They're not police officers. They are race soldiers if they're doing it based on race. Where did that term come from? I invented it because that's what you got to do in every language to get something done. You don't have a word for a situation, you invent one.
Yes, sir.
So that's the term for it. And that's the way, that's the first thing we should start doing, changing how we talk. Because the talk is everything, because that's what you're going to do when you negotiate and everything else. So you've got to come up with a whole new language, not to speak Swahili, because the people who spoke Swahili were captured. So you have to take the language that the white supremacists has given us in the Northwestern Hemisphere, and that's something called English, because a word is nothing but a tool. So you take that tool and make that tool work for you. There's nothing that's going to stop you from doing that, and you do it in such a way as to reveal the truth.
Yes, sir. Douglas, thank you for calling. Do not be a stranger, my brother. Okay, before we move on, Mr. Fuller has I don't want to call it a tape, but if you want to hear what Mr. Fuller talked about earlier today, which was results, you can. Listen to this. You can. It's called Results, Not Hot Air, with Mr. Neely Fuller and Dr. Randy Short. It's on YouTube. I checked it out 3 or 4 times. Very good. If you want to hear Mr. Fuller talk about results and not hot air, it's on YouTube with Neely Fuller Jr. and Dr. Randy Short. It's on YouTube. Make sure you check that out. Mr. Fuller, before we get to the next call, someone said slaves will always be slaves and their masters are strongest when they convince them they're free. What do you think that's true or what?
Slaves will always be slaves when their masters convince them that they are free.
The exact quote is, slaves will always be slaves, and their masters are strongest when they convince them they're free.
Yes. And so the white supremacists, the ones who are on the planet now, and they have set up a system, a world government called the system of white supremacy. That's what it is. The United States, not America. It's impossible for an American to be a racist, for one thing, or an African or an Asian. That cannot be done, just like it's impossible for a police officer to be a racist. That's impossible. That's impossible. That's the way you should say it. When you come to a microphone or when you're talking to anybody, you say that's impossible. No police officer is brutal. No police officer is a racist. You can't find one. It's impossible for one to even exist. That can't happen. You can't be a police officer and be a racist. So what are you? You're a racist. That's what you are. Call it like it is. Don't get it mixed up. Don't get your words mixed up. Racist police officer. That's a contradiction. police brutality. Stop saying that. You're contradicting yourself, even in what you're asking for. And you get to the place where you don't even know what you're saying. You don't even know what you're asking for. Get rid of the racist police.
All
no.
righty.
You replace white supremacy with justice. That's the way to talk. The entire system. I mean, do a blanket thing. Blanket.
Yes, sir.
I mean, just picking and, picking here and picking there. I mean, they call it, they got a word for it. It's called niggling. Now, you know how close that is to another word. Now, that means small-minded, not looking at the big picture. You look at details, but you keep that big picture in mind. You keep Barzini in mind when you're doing anything. Who's Barzini? All of the people who make the biggest decisions that are going to affect everybody. Now, in the system of white supremacy, that includes everybody who's a white supremacist. They're the only ones who make decisions about everybody. And who are they? Wherever you find them. Might be a person standing next to you in a demonstration, because the white supremacists are good at what? Taking all sides of every argument.
All
Don't
sides.
forget that.
Listen, okay. Listen, people, when you call in at 516-453-9921, if you want to be heard, let's say quickly, and that depends on the answers that Mr. Fuller is addressing each question, make sure that you press the number 1 button. That's very important that you do that, and then we'll get you on as soon as we can. This is what we're going to do. We got Ben coming up, and then Darnell, and then Calvin, I think. But anyway, we'll do that. But Mr. Fuller, right now, right this very moment at 9:42, let's give you a few moments to speak about the book, your book. And I understand, Mr. Fuller and I did receive this news this morning that the books are flying off of the shelf or wherever they're at. They're flying off of it, and we do have plenty available. So thank you for purchasing. Thank you for reading. Thank you for all that you do, but they're moving. Mr. Fuller, this is the time for you to speak about that book.
Yes, you can go to producejustice.com. Now, what is the book that I'm talking about? It's a textbook speech and or action for victims of white supremacy, which is racism. White supremacy is racism. Racism is white supremacy. There's no such thing as a black supremacist nowhere on this planet, maybe somewhere else, because you can't be a prisoner of war and the warden or prison master too. Can't be both. You're one or the other. Now, either you're a victim of white supremacy or you're not. Every black person on this planet is subject to the dictates of the white supremacists. I'm not talking about all white people. I want to make that clear. There are presumably many white people who are not racist in any area of activity. But the most powerful and the smartest white people, according to evidence, are people who practice racism. And if you practice racism, you are a racist in one or more areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. You do something that's racist. And all you have to do is just do one thing. That qualifies you to be a racist. Just do one thing that's racist. Just one. And you're a racist in everything, because everything is connected. If you're a racist in the field of education, you're going to be a racist in everything else. That's counter-racist logic. Mm-hmm. And that's what the book is about that I put out. and it tells the individual victim of racism, the prisoner of war, what you as an individual can do or should be doing in order to do what? Replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice. And everything in this book should be designed to help you do that. If it doesn't help you do that, the book is a failure. And I don't know whether that, I use my own book. See what I mean? That's why I started writing it. I wrote it for me. And then I talked to people about it, and they said, well, it sounds like you got some pretty good stuff going here, Fuller. And one of the people years ago was Dr. Frances Wilson. She was the first person that really said, hey, I think this is really serious, what you're doing. Maybe this is the way out. And I said, well, that's what I think so, because that's why I started writing it, because no one was telling me what to do each and every minute of every day about every situation that I'm in. I said, I had all these grand speeches of people talking about this and, the great African empires. That's all nice and good. But I want to know what to do about my problem that I'm facing right here with somebody's foot on my neck. Or when I get pulled over, I want somebody to tell me what to do in detail to get out of that situation that I'm in. I want somebody to tell me what to do when this is happening and that is happening. I want everything. Where's the package for that? Is anybody writing anything about what to do? I have all the history that I need about how miserable everything is. And I have all the history that I need about who built the pyramids. But I want to know what to do every minute of every day that I'm in a situation that I should not be in. Does anybody have a book that will tell me that? And everybody would just look at everybody and say, well, have another meeting. I said, I'm not talking about meetings. I'm talking about having some instructions. No more grandiose speeches that has a feel-good effect. I don't want to feel good about a bad situation, and I don't want any more books telling me how to do that. I want the bad situation to disappear, like yesterday. Now, that's the type of book I tried to write. Now, people can look at it and see if that's what they find. How to solve your problem that you had yesterday and right this minute, whatever it is. These are the kind of books that should be written by everybody right now. When you sit down with pen and paper, just push all that other stuff aside that you're fixing to say about, how you feel about this and how you feel about that, and, and making a whole lot of grandiose slogans about that. We got enough slogans. I'm not against slogans, but slogans should have plans. A slogan without a plan is like a book with a fancy cover and a fancy title, and when you open the book, it's all blank pages. No. If it tells you something, every book that you pick up should tell you how to solve a problem. Every book should tell you how to solve a problem. And that's the kind of book that I tried to write. A compensatory counter-racist code and a word guide. This is an extension of it. How to use words. Go get it by going to producejustice.com. And then I ask for people to, if you want to use this word, challenge. I prefer the word question, because you should question everything. Everything that Neely Fuller says. Say, wait a minute, Fuller, you said this. Now, this don't make sense to me at all. So I ain't buying nothing that don't make sense. You're going to charge me some money, and you're going to say something to me that don't make sense, I can get that anywhere. Because that's Fuller's position on anybody else who writes anything. So Fuller's no exception. I'm nobody's leader. So if you spend a nickel on anything that I say, it's supposed to work. Why buy something that doesn't work? buying a bicycle with no wheels. No, it's supposed to work. Okay. Go get the book and sample it. Go into producejustice.com and then come on there and say, you said this on this page, just like people do on this program right now. I hear people say, well, you can't, you're not respecting Mr. Fuller. Now, hey, it's not about that. It's about questions and answers. Fuller needs to answer questions. If he sets himself up to answer questions, answer the questions, Fuller. And everybody else on the planet, white and non-white, should be able to answer questions about their behavior. Everybody, without exception. I'm saying everybody without exception. Answer questions about what you do that's going to affect other people on this planet. You should be able to answer. The code itself says what? Stand by your work. Stand by your work. You write something, you stand by what you wrote. You shoot a pistol into the night and you hit somebody, you should stand up and tell the whole world, yes, I did it, and I'm going to do it again because it should have been done. Don't throw a rock and run and try to have somebody else take the rap. Black people, more than anybody on the planet, shouldn't want that to ever happen to anybody. I don't care who it is. Code book itself says, stand by your work. If you say something, say you said it, and be able to repeat it. If you do something, if you kill someone, everyone in the world should know who did it and why. I'm saying not next week, the minute that you do it. Throw a rock and run, that should never be a characteristic of a black person. Yes, I did it. Don't blame it on the fellow down the street, because that's what you're going to do. You're going to blame somebody. And if I'm not there, you're going to blame whoever's there. No, I'm going to stand by my work. Yeah, I did it. Now, do what you got to do. That's what the code is about. And everything else that I think that we need, because we need a lot of things. We need a code for everything. Get it by going to producejustice.com.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Let's go to, Ben. See if I can get you in here, Ben. Okay, Ben, you're on with Mr. Fuller. Sorry about the time. You only have about 6 minutes, so go ahead, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Bobby. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I just want to give a VGQ.
Yes, sir.
So as a non-white person from the place called the African continent, I have never in my entire existence understand the purpose of my existence until I really started to listen to the logic and understanding Mr. Fuller's code and actually using that foundation to set up my own personal code. Since I started to do that, my life has begun to make sense. I've begun to live my life in a codified manner. So I encourage all of you who are listening to this program and who do not have the book, get the book, read the book. It's going to change you. This book has allowed me to see the cracks between things. I can differentiate noise from what's real. And I want all of you to do so. And Mr. Fuller, I just had a quick question for you. In the top cover of your book, you made a statement, and you said that the initial purpose of this work is to help people to produce the will to produce justice. And you have will underlined. How important it is to have the will to produce justice.
Oh, you have to have the will to do anything. People who, I don't know anything much about, almost zero about karate and jiu-jitsu and all like that, all like doing anything, flying an airplane and whatnot. You got to have that will. You got to have the will. If you lose confidence in what you're doing, from what I understand, like if somebody's going to take their fist and break a brick, break a stone, a cinder block, like they do, and I don't know what you call it, karate, jiu-jitsu, or something like that, or whatever name you want to call it, kung fu and whatnot, and you're practicing this type of science, an art. Some people call it an art, some people call it a science. It might be both, or neither one, or whatever. But you've seen pictures of people look at a stone, and in their mind begins to work, and they have their fist balled up. And you can see the intensity. You can feel it almost, by looking at them. And then they raise their fists, and they come down on that cinder block, and they break it. Sometimes with just a corner of one hand. I've seen that. I don't know how real it is, but people have told me it's real. They've tested the cinder block and all like that. And you have to have will to do that. If somehow, when your hand comes down, they have told me, if you suddenly get fearful of breaking that cinder block right in the middle of the act of bringing your hand down on it, you'll break your hand. But if you still have that confidence that cinder block is going to give way to your hand, it will. Now, I don't know the mechanics of how that really works, but people say it has repeatedly worked all down through the centuries for people who have practiced that science or that art, that it really does work. So, in answer to the question, will, W-I-L-L, having the willpower to take that step forward and say, I have confidence in what I am doing, because before I took this step, I prepared myself for everything that's going to come after my taking that step. A tightrope walker. Boy, if you lose confidence while you're out there in the middle of those two buildings, 50 stories up, and you are walking on a tightrope, from what people have told me, you suddenly get, hey, I don't think I can do this, you're not going to be able to do it. And you're going to drop. You lose that pole, and then you start trying to hang on, and now you're desperate and whatnot, and now you're losing confidence in hanging on. Now is the moment that you turn loose and drop.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Ben, thank you for calling. Do not be a stranger. And, again, thank you. We are coming up on the end of the first hour. We have to be sure of that. So we want to thank you for listening to the first hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. and me, Mr. Bobby, as your co-host. We have a lot of callers on the line. We have Darnell and Patrick, Michael, and David, and then we have Gmails that we are going to read. Oh, yeah. So we will do that. So thank you again for listening to the Counter Racist Code Show, also known as the CRCS with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. here on ProduceJustice.com. Thank you again, and stay tuned for the second hour of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Okay. Getting the signal here. Okay. Hello again, and thank you. It is now 20 seconds before 10 o'clock. You are now AM in the Northwestern concept called the United States. You're listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. Okay, there we go, 10 a.m. Okay. We are staying focused on what we're supposed to do. get those results. We will take your calls. Do this. You can dial 516-453-9921. I am told by my producers to make sure that you press the number 1 button and you will fall into order. Okay, Gmails will be read approximately 20 minutes from now. So let me see as we search here. I am supposed to get this gentleman here, Darnell. Okay, Darnell from Phoenix. You're, let me see. Wait a minute. Okay, you are now on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, please, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning.
Mr. Bobby, you talked about the results video in hot air, and I actually heard that video.
Yes.
And it was absolutely amazing. And over the weekend, I heard Dr. Fuller say results in my head about 50 million times. And so my question for Mr. Fuller today is, in that speech you talked about not having a whole lot to say to a Mr. Tim. Why? Because you're not really interested in talk, and you're more interested in results, and you didn't have black people. We didn't start white supremacy. So I was wondering if Mr. Fuller could speak to that a little bit today and explain why it's important them to fix supremacy and not non-blacks, because we didn't start it.
Okay. Mr. Fuller?
Well, that's the thing, if I understand the question. Yes, you ask white people. Now, the white people who are out here now, I mean, demonstrating, whom are they demonstrating against? There's an old saying, we have met the enemy, and the enemy is us. In other words, I think it was Michael Jackson that said something about the man in the mirror. I don't know what that song is all about, but I've heard that title. I've heard people say that many years ago, before Michael Jackson, the singer. The person in the mirror. And, who is that person in the mirror? What is that person? Is that person a racist? If you're white, look in the mirror. Say, how am I classified racially? And if the answer is, mirror, mirror, how am I classified? Snow White, all right. You're classified as white, a white person. Okay, what does that mean? Well, that means that you're white or classified as white. Somebody said that's what you were. Well, what else am I? Well, are you using your whiteness to be a racist? Well, what is a racist? A racist is a person that mistreats people, dominates and mistreats people based on color. Do you do that in any area of activity? Economics, when you do anything, buying and selling or anything that has to do with the use of time and energy, which is what basic in economics is. Economics is just not about money. Economics is about how you use time and energy. Okay, how do you use your time? How do you use your energy? Do you use your time and energy to do anything against a person based on color? Well, is that economical? Constructive? Because everything is divided into two categories to the person in the mirror. Constructive, non-constructive. Are you constructive or non-constructive? When? Where? In economics? In education? In entertainment? When you engage in anything that's supposed to be entertaining, is that entertainment constructive or non-constructive? Is it racist or is it non-racist or anti-racist? Labor. Do you do anything in your work that's mistreating people based on color if you are a person classified as white? Do you do one little thing in anything that has to do with your job that is racist, that is mistreating someone based on color, that makes you a racist. That's who you are. That person in the mirror you're looking at, that's you. Do you do anything ever that's racist? Now, I've heard about the cliche and all like that in answer to the question, I think. I'm just trying to get a frame on everything and trying to get some focus on everything about a person who is black on an elevator. This is an illustration that I've often heard about, and I've experienced something like that myself. And there's another person on the elevator who is white. And I've heard about incidents of the white lady on the elevator with a black male, tall, athletic, dreadlocks, and she clutches her purse. Okay? Now, I've heard that black people get very incensed about that. But I'm going to recount an incident that involved me, black people. And this is the truth, folks. I got on an elevator in the apartment building where I resided because I used the elevator. And on that elevator was a lady who is black. I recognized her immediately, and I had heard that she was also a resident of the same building. She didn't clutch her purse, but she moved away from me and eyed me somewhat apprehensively, even though I wasn't wearing a mask or dreadlocks or anything like that. I don't have an athletic build. But she moved over into the corner. And I understood it. Because there had been a lot of robberies around there, around this area, recently. Some taking place in the building. So the lady was on a cane. That lady was Barbara Jordan, but she was a little leery of being on the elevator with me because of the reports of some black males robbing. Now, the question is, do black people rob people, including other black people? Do they do it or not? And the answer is yes. Wholesale, all the time, every day. So you're going to get angry about somebody who gets suspicious of a black male? Word has gotten out that yes, it is possible that black males, black people, do rob people. Well, somebody will say, well, white people do some big-time robbery and all like that. That's not the question. Do black people rob people? Because the code book says don't rob anybody. You want something, ask for it. We got to get out of that thing of carrying on the tradition that the white supremacists has put on us of thinking that robbing people is the way to go. No. You beg. You say, beg? That's what we've been doing all our lives. I said, hey, the code says it's better to beg than to rob. We always, a lot of us, we praise Jesus and all like that. Jesus was a beggar. He had to beg for a place to stay, like we do. His folks had to beg for a place to stay. Wound up being in a barn. That's where Jesus was born. I'm talking about the Northwestern Hemisphere now, so most black people in the Northwestern Hemisphere are familiar with a person called Jesus. They clap their hands and stomp their feet and talking about this person. But basically, from what I've heard, he did a lot of begging. He begged people to do this and to do that, pleaded with them. They threw rocks at him and whatnot. He just kept on begging. That's what I've heard. Now, I didn't intend to go this far with this particular point, but I think I might be making the point, because sometimes you got to make a lot of points from what I've learned in order for people to understand what you're saying, rather than just make a statement about don't do this and don't do that. You got to give a whole lot of whys, because that's what I want from people. You tell me to do something, I want to hear why. And I want to know what the result is going to be, because like the person that just called in, results. What's the result? After you talk for 15 hours, I don't care what the speaker is saying. I want to know, now what's supposed to be the result of everything that you just told me? Fuller, or any professor, or any preacher, or anybody else. I heard all this talk that lasted for 3 hours. Now, what am I supposed to do with this information that will produce the results that's supposed to be produced? Now, if they can't answer that, they got no business opening their mouth in the first place, and that includes Neely Fuller.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Mr. Fuller.
All right,
thank you.
sir. I'm so sorry. I can't take another call. We have so many lined up.
No. I was just saying thank you, and that Mr. Fuller nailed it.
Okay. Thank you, man. Appreciate your understanding, man. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. That was Darnell. He was on there for a while. Let me do this. Here's a man that's really been on there. Okay, my man Calvin, you're on next. Wait a minute. There you go. Okay, Calvin, go ahead with your question for Mr. Fuller.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning, Calvin.
Mr. Fuller, I'm glad you were just talking about Jesus, because that's what my question. The very first time I called you about, 5-6 years ago, I asked you, should we be worshiping the Creator or waiting on Jesus more than we should be trying to produce justice? And that's my question again today, is kind of, does the belief and the logic, which one makes more sense? Because to me the belief and the logic is not lining up. So I just kind of want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, it depends on who you listen to, and I say listen to everybody. Now, there are people who tell you that, so I'm not going to argue with them, because the code absolutely forbids me to get into a religious argument of any kind with anybody about, once they say they have a religion and that they're coming from the perspective of their religion, I am absolutely prohibited from arguing with anybody about their religion except just one. It's one exception, the religion of white supremacy. And I won't have an argument with anybody about that. I will have a conversation. Now, what's the difference between a conversation and an argument? A conversation is designed to solve problems. An argument is designed to win an argument. So I'm prohibited from having an argument with anybody about anything. So what's the mechanics of having a conversation? Questions and answers. So when it comes to any religion, I have to stick with the codified format. I can not deviate not 1 inch from it. What is the name of your religion? What does your religion require you to do? And what does your religion require you to do in all 9 areas of activity when you interact with me? And that's all I want to know about anybody's religion, because the code prohibits me to go outside of that in a conversation, so that I don't get into what? A religious argument because of what? Why avoid getting into a religious argument? Because an argument is going to lead to somebody winning the argument, and the loser of the argument in many cases, will get incensed about having lost the argument, and then the next thing you know, there's a fight, and from the fight is going to come killing, which is why you have people killing each other all over the world now in the name of religion. So you back off of that. You don't start that kind of mess, it won't be none. So you simply say, what is the name of your religion? What does your religion require you to do? And what does your religion require you to do when you interact with me? Now, having gotten that out of the way, according to my religion, I'm supposed to be against the religion of white supremacy and conduct it in a manner. All of my counter-racist activities are supposed to be done in a manner that helps to replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice. When people talk about religious freedom, I say when it comes to the religious freedom for white supremacists, I'll stand within the realm of what we call the Constitution. Because my religion requires me to be against a religion called the system of white supremacy. Now, a lot of people say that's not a religion, but the evidence shows that's the most powerful religion that has ever been on this planet called Earth. No religion has proven to be more powerful than the religion of white supremacy. But it's an evil religion, and everyone should be against it, and I don't back off of that. That's what it is. What is a religion? A strong belief backed up by action.
Yes, sir.
Nobody practices their religion as precisely as the white supremacists do. That's why it's the strongest religion.
Okay. Calvin, thank you for your call. Appreciate it.
I don't know if I even answered that question, but
wait a minute. Calvin,
that was good. I mean, I know we don't want no religious argument. I just find it seems like people, you try to get them on the code book, and they want to talk about the Bible. That's kind of where I was going.
Well, yes, and that's okay. But the minute you do that, you just simply say, well, okay, but you are still talking about what you are talking about. Stick to the question that you asked them. It's okay for them to answer from the Bible or from the Quran or from the Constitution or from something that they wrote last night or from something that they just said off the top of their heads. But the whole process of conversation, when you're having a conversation, not an argument, is to stick to the questions. Nothing but questions and answers. You ask them, and if you get lost, you can always go to page 171 and 172. That's the guarantee to take everybody right where they should be, because it has to do with what? WANTS. Wants. That one word. Because every creature wants something as long as it's breathing. Mr. Floyd wanted something. While he was breathing, they took his breath away, so the reports say. There's a lot of demonstrations about that, taking his breath. But with his last breath, he was saying what he wanted. He wanted to breathe. So every creature, every minute of every day that you're awake, you want something. So in order to interact with people in a constructive manner, I found this out by trial and error myself. Every creature wants something. So what are the logical questions to ask about wants when you get lost in a conversation? Because since everybody wants something every second you want something. You want to walk across the room. You want to put on your hat. You want to take your hat off. You want to eat. You want something. So you find out by conversation. You go right to the core of everything, which is people wanting things. What do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? How do you plan to do what you want to do? And then number 4, and this is the main one, what do you expect the constructive result to be of you doing what you want to do?
Okay. Got to leave it there. Thank you, Calvin. Don't be a stranger. All righty. We have to do this. We have to go to the Gmails. Okay, Mr. Fuller. See, this is from, I'll get it here. Oh, yeah, Nawab. Okay, he says this. Mr. Fuller, there are others out here who respect your work overall, but who take issue with your concept of might, power, and ingenuity of the so-called white supremacist. They've told me that it sounds at times as if you're singing hymns, odes, and spirituals to the white supremacist over how mighty and great he is, the way a gospel singer sings about the Lord. They agree that white supremacists run the world. However, they don't believe that you should be making it seem as if there's little to nothing we can do outside of asking them a string of questions, waiting for them to give us answers, and also just changing our interactions with each other. Many of these critics view the white supremacist as a coward who, because of ill-gotten gains he stole from us, uses that then to confuse and oppress much of the planet. Yes, he has power because of that, and you can argue that makes him ingenious. However, in their view, that doesn't make him great. It makes him weak and recessive, demon drunk on power. So my question to you, Mr. Fuller, is, do you believe that you're singing the white supremacist praises? And if not, why and how not? Thank you, Brother Jay.
Well, I thank him for his viewpoints, and I often hear that. I've spent about 50 years hearing that. And I just kept writing. I say you answer to the question by going to the code. Questions and answers. All problems are solved through the process of questions and answers. The white supremacists are powerful. If they weren't powerful, I wouldn't be on the air talking about them at all. I mean, because I would just simply say, they got no power. You know, they're not nobody. I don't have to pay no attention to them. Why should I pay attention to a white supremacist? They're not doing nothing. They don't have nothing to do with me. I do what I want to do. I've heard a lot of black people say that. Well, my code book is not for them. Now, the black person who says that, and some black people have said, no such thing as white supremacy. No such thing as racism. I don't know what that guy's talking about. One of the first people to read my book, I'm just giving illustrations, said, Fuller, I read your book. I understand what you're saying, but it ain't nothing in there that will help me do nothing. Now, that was one of the first people that I gave my book to, and I asked him what did he think, and he told me, because that's what I like. He said, there's nothing in there. He said, what you did is just wasted your time writing all this mess. I mean, he gave it to me, straight dose, which is the way I like it. And I said, well, that means one thing. This is a compensatory code, meaning making up for what's missing. If something is missing, if you haven't covered everything that you need to cover. So this book is not for you. I told him that because that's the truth. The book is a help book, self-help. So there are many people who say that racism is no problem with me. Ain't no white man telling me what to do, a white woman either, or anything white. Don't make me do nothing. I've heard black people say that. And the codified response that I'm supposed to give, if that's your position, if you have no problem at all with racism, and what people call the problem, you breeze right through it. then nothing in this book that I wrote, Neely Fuller, Jr., you're correct, is for you. That's the way it's supposed to work. I'm not supposed to start looking for an argument to prove my point. That's a code violation big time. In fact, Neely Fuller violates the code every time I'm on the air, like I might be doing right this minute. And I'm going to tell you where I violate it. Because in some parts of what I do to myself, because I evaluate myself, I'm sounding like I'm preaching. And I do not like that in me. And then in other parts, I sound like I'm teaching. And when it comes to the code says, Fuller, you're not supposed to be teaching anybody anything. You ain't a teacher. You're not a leader. You're not a preacher. You're not qualified to be none of that. You're just a book writer, and a raggedy one at that. So all you do is just tell what's in the code book. Tell, not preach, not teach. I keep having to remind myself of that. Mm-hmm. But I fail every time I'm on the air like I'm doing right now. I think I sounded like some kind of preacher. Boy, I don't ever want to sound like I'm preaching. Preachers preach the gospel. I don't have any gospel. I just got some suggestions about how to get through the day. That's what my whole code book is about. I hope that answers the person's question.
Okay. Well, maybe you're still learning, as you always say at the beginning.
Yes, I'm still learning. I'll learn. I learn when he calls in and tells me what he just said. I learn. Because I'm learning how many people are saying this and how many people are thinking like this. Hey,
yes,
the white folks say, they ain't got no power. They ain't nobody. I mean, why should we be paying attention to them about anything? Just go and do your thing, man. I mean, get a life.
All right.
People say that. And I think about it. Okay? But it ain't never worked for me to try to ignore white people and just do my thing. That's never worked for me.
Okay. Okay, got to try to get this in here. Question. This comes from iTest. He says, I've been dealing with racism on the job, but my foreman is an Uncle Tom, so he feeds me to the wolves, so to speak. He's always trying to get me in trouble with his and my racist suspect supervisors. So, Mr. Neely Fuller, what are the procedures when dealing with so-called Uncle Toms at work, and being that times are getting rougher and rougher for non-white people, Mr. Fuller, do you think that non-white people maybe wait until we reach mid-30s to have offspring to give them more stability? Thank you. I test.
Well, I have to answer one question at a time. I kind of work that way. So that first one was on the job, dealing with so-called Uncle Toms.
Yes, sir.
Well, the code book says that, first of all, we have definitions. What's an Uncle Tom? If I'm born in a prison called the system of white supremacy, that's the name of the prison, and I am a prisoner in that system, the question is, do I cooperate with the system? Doesn't make any difference at what level I do it. Am I a prison master? Because it's not for two classifications of people in a prison who are there regularly. You have visitors, but in a prison system, you have prison masters and you have prisoners. Prisoners, prison masters. You don't have anybody else in there. There's nobody else in there. You're one or the other. So if you are a prisoner in a prison, you are cooperating with the prison system if you're breathing, just by being there. So that thing about Uncle Tom, and another term I've heard is sellouts and all that type of thing, and traitors and all that. No, you're always dealing with the prison masters. So that's what you do in the system of white supremacy. The white supremacists are the masters of black people. That's the assumption, according to all the evidence.
Okay. Mr. Fuller, hold it right there. Hold it right there. I hate to interrupt you, but I have to do this. They're telling me here. Ladies and gentlemen, ma'am, sir, you're listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Pardon the interruption, but I have to do that, so don't get on me. Well, if you want to, go ahead. But I have to do this. The Counter Racist Code Show, also known as the CRCS, with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. You can get in contact with the show by calling 516-453-9921. I'm going to repeat that slowly, 516-453-9921. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, B-O-B-B-Y, and chances are I'm not going to be able to read that today. Now, I am efforting to do what I have to do to try to get you on the air, but I try to give Mr. Fuller a great opportunity to answer your questions fully. But sometimes I may have to interrupt. That's just the way that it is. Okay. Also, if you want to hear more of Mr. Neely Fuller, you can. There's a tremendous YouTube, I don't want to call it documentary, but a discussion on results. Yeah, YouTube results, not hot air, with Neely Fuller and also Dr. Randy Short. Very compelling, very interesting. You may want to give that an opportunity to listen to it and see what you think, as one caller did earlier today. Again, the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. here at ProduceJustice.com. Okay, and the second question before we go to David is this, Mr. Fuller. Being that times are getting rougher and rougher for non-white people, Mr. Fuller, do you think that non-white people should maybe wait until we reach mid-30s to have offspring to give them more stability?
Well, I'll try to answer that question right quick. I don't know about that. I can't put a date on it because it varies from person to person, like everything in the code. See, so I don't know. I don't have an answer to an exact age that a person would be by a calendar, the Gregorian Pope Gregory's calendar.
Okay.
I don't know, because everybody's circumstances are different.
Yes.
Now, but I'd like to go back to the answer to that first question, because I don't think I answered it.
Yeah,
on a job situation, it says specifically that what you do is very patiently and courteously dealing with any other non-white people, listen to what that white person has to say, and then you go into the question mode. Is anybody being mistreated? And if the person says, a black supervisor says, no, nobody's being mistreated. You ain't being mistreated. I mean, I ain't mistreating you. I mean, I'm the supervisor, and I'm just telling you what you got to do, and you got to do it. And then you can discourteously ask, well, is what is being done, if you think that what is being done is something that shouldn't be done, you just simply ask a question. Stay in the question lane. And don't make accusations at all. Just say, well, is this something that should be done? And if the person says, yes, I'm telling you to do it, because I'm the supervisor. And you just simply ask him, is it something that's what you're being told to do in the manner in which it should be done? And he's telling you to do it or not do it. You say, why? Okay. And what's going to be the constructive result? And let him explain. Let's ask questions. And if you think that it's not something you should be doing and it's going to produce a constructive result, that you are being hurt in some way, mistreated in some way, then you ask him or her, well, do you think that this is mistreatment? And if they say, no, it's not mistreatment, but you still think it's mistreatment, then you say, well, do you think that anybody should be mistreated? Just ask them a question on this job. And if they say, no, I don't think anybody should be mistreated, and you are not being mistreated, then you say, well, do you think that other people, like the person that tells you what to do, would consider this to be mistreatment? And if they say no, then you got a question now, because now you want to ask the next person, the person that tells that person what to do, if it's mistreatment. Now, if that person says, and that person is white, because ultimately that's who it's going to be in a system of white supremacy, either directly or indirectly, even if it's some office somewhere in another city, that person is going to be white. Because in the white supremacist world, it's always the last word is with somebody white. So that's really who you want to talk to. You don't ever argue with black people who are supervisors or anything else. Don't get in no argument with them. That's a setup. That's a trap. That's a trap that most black people fall into. I almost fell into it when I was on the job. But I said, Fuller, wait a minute. Hey, you wrote a book about white supremacy, and you're contradicting yourself. You're no exception. Fuller, you are no exception. Wake up and smell the coffee. So what's the procedure, Fuller? The procedure that you think that, is logical. If white people tell all other black people what they to do and what they better not do, doesn't that include your supervisors? And Eureka is a wake-up moment, because that's when it became codified. So just ask questions, and then you ask for permission to have an audience with the person who makes the final decision, and that person is always going to be white. And just keep asking for permission, like Andy the Frame did. I want to talk to the people who talk to the people who talk to the people who talk to the people. I want to know, like Harry Truman once said, the buck stops here. And buck, by the way, is sort of like a slang term for a whole lot of slave Negroes, black people, by the way. See what I mean? So when a white person says the buck stops here, that's who you want to talk to. And when you get to them, you ask questions. And what you ask for is justice. And in the Northwestern Hemisphere, you go to the 5th and 14th Amendments. I don't have time to go further than this because I got other questions, but that's the procedure.
Okay.
Always, it doesn't really get serious until you're talking to somebody white.
Okay.
You've got to do that.
You've got
to get permission to do it.
Yes,
Go,
sir.
They say go through channels, so you always do that.
Okay, I'm getting on my screen Patrick, Michael, David, Al, and Estelle. They're putting a little thing there. We may not be able to get to you because we have to let Mr. Fuller get a chance to get to his answer to a question, but we're going to effort to get it. David, man, you made it. Go ahead. You're on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, please.
All right. It was a show on Prime Video, Amazon Prime Video, that I wanted to point out that I learned a lesson from. It was a scene in the very first episode where the young lady, it was a young black lady in the washing area, and it was a Nazi race soldier washing his clothes in the washateria, and she was just kind of looking at him, saw a swastika on his back, and he told her, which I believe was a profound statement, that when you don't separate the whites and the colors always bleed. So I took from that, it made me think about how when we were segregated, in my opinion, we were more or less so empowered to help one another, you know what I'm saying, uplift each one another, empower one another, you know what I'm saying, build with one another. But once we were integrated, like Martin Luther King said, he feared that he led his people to a burning house. I wanted to ask Mr. Neely Fuller, in his opinion, according to the code, does he think that it would be better for us to kind of separate from everybody that's white and then separate from everybody that's non-white, like all of us get away from each other?
I don't think that will work on a planet called Earth. I think that'll work if everybody's on a separate planet and cannot be in touch with each other any kind of way, including by communicating. Now that will work. If all the black people are on another planet that no white people could reach or talk to anyone, See, that's contact. Talking is contact. You influence people when you contact them. Anytime you make having a conversation with somebody, or you can have by the computer you got in your hand or whatnot, that's contact. So you can't have contact. I've heard white people say, well, black people and white people should be in separate worlds. Well, they have proven that they don't believe in that. All the guys with swastikas and whatnot, when there ain't no black people around, they come looking for you. They cross oceans, chasing you down. You're running from them. They're trying to catch you. See, they did that all over the world. See what I mean? So, but in answer to your question, suppose they didn't do that, and we were all separate. Well, separate means completely separate. You don't trade. You don't talk to each other. You don't do nothing that involves each other's business. I mean, it is separate means totally separate.
Yes, sir.
That's never been. There's never been a time in recorded history when that was true. Going all the way back thousands of years, the Romans went and dragged black people up into Italy to fight the lions in the Colosseums. So I've been told, unless I've been misinformed. So in answer to your question, if we're having any kind of trade, if you're just going to trade and say, well, the Indians had their own thing and the white man had his own thing, and they are trading, that's not separate. You can be trading fur for something, commodity and whatnot, some mirrors and whatnot that they made and all like that. You're going to be talking to each other. That's not separate. You're talking to a person. You're not separate. The minute you start talking to a person, you're not separate from that person.
Right.
Separate means you don't even talk to the person. Don't even say good morning.
Okay.
Now, how are you going to do that on the same planet when you're dependent on the environment? The white supremacists build a dam 700 miles up the river, okay? They cut off the water because the water's holding back. That dam is holding back the water that feeds your crops. Right. Now, you're going to have to do some talking to somebody. Otherwise, you're going to starve to death 700 miles away. You say, well, them white folks is up there 700 miles away, and we black people are down here. I mean, and that's the way it ought to be, because now we don't have to deal with their mess. Oh, yeah. Because they built a dam up there. And all that water you got out there that you call your river, in 4 years it's going to be dry.
Okay.
So you're going to talk to somebody. See, they understand that.
Yes.
See, so that's propaganda about how they want to be separate.
Okay.
How are you going to be separate from somebody you want to dominate?
Always
no
ask
way to do
questions.
That.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Hey, David, thank you. Do not be a stranger to this call, or to this radio show. Thank you so much. All right, this is what we're going to do. We are going to, the next caller is going to be, I think it's going to be, let me see here, let me get this straight. Let's see, he's held the longest. So that's going to be, wait a minute. It's going to be Michael. But, Michael, before we do that, Mr. Fuller, I'm going to ask you to speak about your book for a couple of minutes so we can try to get everybody in on the phone call. So go ahead, please, sir.
Everything that we're talking about right now is supposed to be covered in the book or touched on it in some type of way, because it's about what? Problem solving. Just two words.
Sir.
We're put here on this planet to solve problems. So I tried to write a book that's designed with this in mind. When I didn't start out doing this, but once I started writing, and here about the time I got to the revised expanded edition, I had cemented in my own mind, Fuller, what are you writing this book for? The textbook for victims of white supremacy, the counter-racist code, which is what I say we really need, a code that's designed to handle each individual's problems, because that's what the book is about, handling each individual black, and or non-white person or person of color's problems on a daily basis on the entire planet. What to do and what not to do, because problem solving is all about doing and not doing. What works and what doesn't work. What's constructive and what's non-constructive. It doesn't deviate from that. And so I tried to write a book saying we got a race problem, and this book is supposed to be designed to do one thing: solve the race problem. Why or how? By solving everybody's problem who is a victim of racism. Each and every individual's problems in all areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And that's how the book is segmented. I don't say divided.
Right.
Because it's really not divided, because whatever happens in economics affects whatever happens in religion. Whatever happens in religion affects whatever happens in sex. Whatever happens in sex affects whatever happens in education.
Yeah.
And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I say they are segmented. That's how the book is segmented. In those 9 areas, I invented those and put that in the book. It's supposed to help people as individuals. Go to producejustice.com. Producejustice.com.
Okay.
And you can get the book by going to there.
All righty. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Okay, Michael, you've been a tremendous sport. Let me see if I can get you there. Okay, Michael, you are now on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, please, sir.
Hey, good morning, you guys.
Good morning.
I just really got a statement and a quick question that can be answered with yes or no. But I remember listening to some episode a few years back of Mr. Fuller saying that you'd have to watch the suspected white supremacists that are out marching and protesting with black folks. I'm paraphrasing, they'll throw a brick into the crowd of cops and then hide their hands and blend in with black folks. And that's actually been confirmed. I'm sure you guys have been seeing that all over the place. White supremacists, suspected white supremacists, setting buildings on fire and writing Black Lives Matter and then falling back into the crowd of black folks.
Yes, sir.
But I believe that the code book is actually absolutely right. And what you're saying, it is all about questions and answers. The suspected white supremacists, they ask a question. Well, I got these diamonds over here with all these dark-skinned people. What's the best way to get to those diamonds? That's a question. Well, I got this Ebola I can put over in the river. That's an answer. Questions and answers, so forth. And then they eventually put action behind the questions and answers. Black folks, we don't seem to get that. I don't understand. But I just say that the code book is absolutely right. I mean, after listening to Mr. Fuller, it's actually kind of hard to listen to a lot of other speakers because a lot of things he says will trump, I don't know, by accident, or I doubt if it's on purpose, it'll trump a lot of what a lot of other black speakers are saying. But and my question is, it's just a yes or no. Do you allow for people to speak with you off of the air?
I have done that, but I started limiting that because I have limited time, and I'm running out of time. I mean,
yes, sir.
I've gotten up in age now where I'm desperately trying to use a little time that I got, and I think about the ocean of time that I wasted. I mean, up until about actually age 30, I didn't have no sense at all about nothing and have very little now. As old as I am, I'm supposed to be eons ahead of where I am now in my thinking. But, a lot of people have said that all down through the ages. You don't start getting halfway smart until it's too late.
Just too
and
late,
I got just a little bit of understanding of the world that I'm in, even at my age. That's why I keep saying I'm still learning. And the thing about it, I'm desperation learning. So I'm saying anybody who's 20 years old, man, Would I like that? But everybody
Yes.
who is my age says that. Man, if I could just go back. If I could go back and be 20 years old and know what I know now, yeah.
Wow.
I used to hear old people say that all the time. Now I'm one of them.
Now
and I know how that works.
Yeah.
Man, you look back and you say, oh, my goodness, I could have avoided a whole bunch of nonsense.
Hey, you're still learning, Mr. Fuller. You're still learning.
Yes.
Okay,
right.
Michael, listen, don't be a stranger, my brother, all righty? And thank you
All right,
for
thanks
calling. Okay, now what I'm going to try to do, Mr. Fuller, I'm going to try to get these callers in here. So we got 9 minutes. Okay, Patrick and then Estelle. Hang on, honey. I'm going to try to get you in here. Okay, Patrick, do your thing, man.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr.
Good morning.
Fuller. Mr. Fuller, like you stated about the books, I have read a lot of books on our history and our problems that we continue to have. But I believe that everyone has their own field of so-called expertise in which he or she is passionate about. So I would like to deal with economics. I've gone to the Million Man marches and listened to a lot of great speakers, but there's still a void missing in our problems. Then I realized that we are all sitting waiting on the Savior, but collectively I feel like we are that Savior that we are waiting for, and this is what the white man has realized. You know, I think this is our underlying foundation to all our problems. So my question is, how can we solve our problems economically? And can I get a direct answer on how we can pool our money together to build economic growth and development? Right now, we have a platform with millions of people listening, waiting on instructions of what to do and how to do something / anything collectively, because individually we get crushed every time, but collectively we should be able to rise like Marcus Garvey, but still something, or rather some people continue to attack us and allow us to forget our accomplishments even before the Caucasian contact and then after, during Reconstruction era, Black Wall Street, etc. So during this book, can we get some basic questions answered on how we could collectively come together?
Okay, Mr. Fuller?
Okay, I'm going to try to keep it codified simple.
Okay, good.
Because all we're really talking about is time and energy.
That's all.
That's economics. That's the first entry into the areas of activity of what people do. Is segmented into 9 areas, not divided because it's all interactive. And that's economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Okay? That's what people are engaged in all the time here on the planet called Earth, according to logic and evidence. Now, so let's start with what you're talking about. The first one, economics. What is economics? How you use your time and your energy as an individual person. And it says on page 60, 4 things, just 4. If you really want an answer to your question, I go right to that. That's what a code is for. Go right to the answer to the question. What do you do in economics? And you mentioned something about Black Wall Street and all like that. Don't even think like that, according to the code. I mean, don't think about Marcus Garvey and collectivity and all like that, because that gets to be not discounting that, but I'm saying if you're thinking about what can you do as an individual right this minute, go to page 60 in the textbook workbook for victims of white supremacy. And you've got 4 things, and if you're doing one of those 4 things any time of day or night where you happen to be on the entire planet, and you're a person of color, you are supposed to be doing one of those four things. Maybe not all of them, but out of those four things, you're supposed to be doing one of them at any given time. At any given time. Starting with the first one, and then the second one, and then the third one, and then the fourth one, in order to produce constructive results, because all of them say what you're supposed to be doing. So if you ever get lost, if every black person on the planet is following just those four things, the uses of time and energy, because that's what everybody comes into the world with, even before you even hear about money. The use of your time and energy. Everything will start changing in the favor of the people who are victims of white supremacy. If they just stick to those four things.
Okay.
Anytime you're not doing one of those four things, you're saying, I'm off the charts now. I'm not on course. I'm not on my assignment.
Okay.
It's just
Patrick,
okay.
do not
Thank
be
you,
a stranger. Thank you for calling. I tell you what, I have your number here in case you want to call back next week. I will give you and I will give Estelle priority so that you can get back in here. But we're pressed up against time. So, again, thanks for calling, and don't be a stranger. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's try to get this in here. Let me see if I can get her. Estelle, I was trying to get to you. I have your number. I was going to give you the priority, but I couldn't. So I guess that takes care of it. Douglas, I tell you what I'm going to do. You got a minute. I'm going to go ahead on and let you in because Estelle was gone. Go ahead, Douglas. You got 1 minute to speak with Mr. Fuller on your second question. Go ahead, Douglas.
Thanks a lot. I just had a VG Q.
Okay.
I'm here in Philadelphia, and it's been a lot of looting. And what I've seen on the news was these guys, they looted. They was driving their cars fast. No cops chasing them. And two looters collided. And one of the cars, it was two adults that had died, and they actually had kids in the back. And I'm telling everybody, my peers, my family members, that looting is no solution to that. All they did was bring in the National Guards here in Philly, and they're just putting their foot on our necks even more.
Oh, okay. All righty. But hey, thank you for your call, and again, don't be a stranger either. Even though I know you called back. Usually we don't let second calls in, but okay, don't be a stranger. Anybody else you didn't get in this time? You're welcome. Try to get in next time. We try to give Mr. Fuller, without me interrupting, but I have to sometimes, a chance to get the call in. So, look, we will effort to do better. Estelle, I have your number in case you want to call back, and we will give you priority next week if you want to call in. I say that so that nobody will try to say that they are Estelle and then try to take your place, but we have you down in here. Mr. Fuller, we have exactly 1 minute to go on today's show. You have anything to say about who cared about George Floyd before he was murdered?
Well, nobody cared, really, what you call care. Care for black people on this planet, for the victims of white supremacy, means we should all be thinking all the time about replacing the system of racism with the system of justice and stop making what has been our priority for breathing, for wanting to keep breathing without someone's knee on our necks or whatever, or a rope around our necks, cutting off our breathing. The reason for every non-white person on this planet being on this planet should be, first of all, to replace the system of white supremacy with the system of justice. Okay. And for the Northwestern Hemisphere, where black people are concerned, stop making our priority how well we can show off to each other.
I'm
even
sorry
when we're
Mr.
demonstrating.
Fuller. I've got to leave it there because the time is gone. But thank you, Mr. Fuller. Thank you, callers. We'll see you next week. We'll try to do much better. You've been listening to the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. and me, your co-host, Mr. Bobby. We'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you for listening.